I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is the Planning Commission regular meeting on Wednesday, February 19th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the City Council chambers. Roll call.
Detmer, here. Freed,
Here.
Kronberg,
Here.
Meridian,
Here.
Moss,
Here.
Robson.
Present. All right. Approval of minutes, January 15th, 2025. Comments, questions? I am, but I'm going to after the approval of the minute.
Oh, okay.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I'll second it.
So Carolyn Detmer makes the motion to approve and Rich Meridian makes the second. All in favor of passing or approving the minutes? Aye. That's what I can show everyone. Voted aye. All right, I am gonna ask for a agenda amendment for two items. Number one, we have Lindsay from Housing North who would like to make a presentation. I'd like to have her go as item number 3. And then for the item zoning ordinance updates, we'll change to item number 4. And I would like to add committee update and PC discussion. On approval. Motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Okay.
I second.
So Bob made the motion to approve and Max seconded. All in favor? Aye. Everyone agreed. All right. So Lindsay, if you'd like to come forward and introduce yourself.
Good evening. See some familiar faces, which is fun. Hi, Mr. Newman. Do you remember me from Charlevoix?
Right, yes.
Yeah. All right. So, sorry. We worked a lot with the Charlevoix Historical Society over the handful of years that I worked there. My name is Lindsay Dotson. I am the new Andrea for those who were very familiar with working with her. Apologies that it took me so long to get in front of this body. I have been working in this position since August, and prior to coming into this role, I was with the city of Charlevoix for 8 years as the DDA director. And it's been a fun time getting to know everybody in Emmett County, including folks in Resort Township all the way up to Mackinac City. So I said this when I came for a combined DDA and council meeting, that you guys have your ducks in a row. So I've been working with staff behind the scenes, and I'm here to help however possible, but also have been trying to help those who absolutely need it. Because I'm only one person and Andrea was a superhero. So the main reason why I'm here tonight, aside from just introducing myself to those who I haven't met yet, is to let you know about 2 events that are coming up that we're hosting here in Petoskey. One is next week on Wednesday. We have been promoting it in a variety of ways, but I just want to make sure you've heard about it. It's a housing tools workshop that'll be hosted on Wednesday during lunchtime at Beards. It is free to attend, and we will be talking about HTIF and all the other new programs that were just launched within the last couple of years, and really digging into how, you all have been very good at taking advantage of some of these new programs, but we will feed you if you'd like to join us. So I have some flyers that I'll leave so you can pass around. And then March 6th will be a conversation about the countywide, actually statewide eventually, zoning atlas that we are trying to accomplish. So Housing North is kind of leading the charge for not only do we steward the statewide housing plan for our region, but now we are stewarding this housing atlas project or zoning atlas project, which essentially, if you came to our event in October in Traverse City, you may have gone to the session that talked about this either this past year or the year before. But what the zoning atlas project is a mapping tool that is bringing to life every single code that is in existence and making it so that people can search where housing can currently be built. That's pretty much it. Obviously, there's a lot of layers that will be added to it, including things like infrastructure, so you can identify where maybe some opportunities are better than others. But it also can serve as a tool for corridor planning and maybe identifying places that are zoned for housing or certain types of things that it might not make sense. So ultimately, we hope that it ends up being a tool for everybody in the county. And it's something that's being funded by private sources. We're still fundraising at this point. But we're going to be giving a very thorough presentation about what the tool is, how the implementation will work, and all the cool things that will come from it. March 6th, 3:30, and that'll be at the college. So I will leave these with you and hope to see some of you there. And that is all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now moving on to zoning ordinance updates. John?
Yep.
You sure can. Well, you sent it to me.
I sent you a PDF.
Mhm,
I did.
mhm.
Yeah, me. Use this stuff. How do I make it so it's a little bit bigger on the screen?
That's as big as it gets.
Really, okay.
Yeah, I already tried.
Okay, we're gonna. Part of the discussion this evening is Articles 5. General provisions, Article 12, which is administration and enforcement. Article 13 is amendments and severability. This is the code organization. You've gone through it before. We have 14 articles. And we've been, the zoning committee and the planning commission has been working on these. The first group that was reviewed by the zoning committee and then also by the PC was Title I or Article I, which is title and purpose. Article 8 was site plan review and Article 11 was the zoning board of appeals. So those are complete. Those have also been transmitted to the city council for their review and comment. Group number 2 was Article 4, which was overlay districts. Article 10, which was land development options. Those were reviewed also by the zoning committee, by the PC, and those were also sent to the city council for review and comment. The third group, which is this evening, is general provisions, Article 5, Article 12, administration and enforcement, which is primarily the roles and responsibilities of the zoning administrator. And 13 is amendments and severability. So those are going to be, those have been transmitted to the PC a couple of weeks ago. So you had time to review it and it'll be subject to discussion this evening. The general provisions, Article 5, are provisions that are community-wide regardless of zoning district. They apply to all properties. And here's some examples of the general provisions. This was I would say, as part of the zoning committee, this was a highly vetted article that probably took us, 3 meetings to go through at least. But it includes things like building grades, certificate of occupancy, how to deal with corner lots, demolition of buildings, fences, garages, lots adjoining alleys, nonconformities, which is a big part of it, which is non-conforming lots, non-conforming uses, and non-conforming structures. Exceptions to permitted height, shipping containers, temporary structures, and trash removal. This gives you a flavor for these type of general provisions that are citywide. Article 12 is enforcement and administration. Section 12.1 is the definition or the position and the role of the zoning administrator. Section 12.2 deals with fees that can be charged. 12.3 is performance guarantees that the planning commission can require. The city can also require performance guarantees as part of any approval, which would include either a cash deposit, irrevocable letter of credit, or certified check or surety bond. And this is to make sure that the project is completed. All of the facets of the project are completed. This is something that's discretionary. It doesn't have to be applied to any project, but it can be applied to some projects where the planning commission or the city council feel there may be the need to ensure that what's approved actually gets built. There's a section 12.4 under taxes, which says that any outstanding taxes and fees that are owed to the city have to be paid, or at least current. They have to be certified by the treasurer that those fees and taxes are current prior to proceeding with the consideration of an application. Okay. And then 12.5 deals with the public hearing process, which is directly out of the state statute in terms of notification, etc. 12.6 is regarding the zoning permits in terms of the application process, the difference between a plot plan, which somebody can file, like if you're coming in and you want to build a fence, you don't have to have it surveyed at this point in time or an official site plan. You can come in with a hand drawing that shows the dimensions, the location. It's up to the discretion of the zoning administrator if she would like, or he would like, depending on the person, more detail than they can request for a survey in some instances. And then it also talks about when you void a permit. So there's a time frame in there from the time that the permit or the approval was granted, when a permit was granted or filed, how long that permit is in effect until it expires if nothing else happens. And we do, and Lisa can attest that we do have permits. People come in, apply for a permit, she issues a permit, but then nothing happens at all. They don't undertake the project that they got approved. So we put in here that there is a time frame which those permits would then expire. 12.7 deals with violations and penalties. And it says that zoning infractions are a municipal civil infraction. They're not considered a crime, but more of a nuisance, but they're municipal civil infraction. And the city has used that in the past. Article 13 is amendments and severability. 13.1 talks about the process that amendments can occur within the zoning code. We all know that. We've done zoning amendments. There's been rezonings, etc. So that's part of the amendment process. There is a new provision in here, which is section 13.2, which deals with conditional rezonings, which was new when they enacted Public Act 110 of 2006, the Zoning Enabling Act, which provides the ability for a property owner to come to the city for a conditional rezoning, which is site-specific property owner developer initiated. We have that in here in terms of what the process is, the content, the expiration, and the reversion if it doesn't happen. So that's a new provision. And then severability is basically a legal term saying that there's any provision or article or sentence or word that is deleted as a result of a lawsuit. Only that is deleted, not the entire code. So that's the severability provision. So basically, like I said, if it's deemed invalid, it doesn't mean the entire code is invalid. So in a nutshell, those are the three articles: 5, 11, or 5, 12, and 13. These are more of the administrative articles. Okay, we haven't really got into the when we start getting into 2 and 3, that's when we're talking about zoning districts and land uses and all that. These are some of the more administrative articles that the committee has been working on, basically to move through the process. So with that, I know that we had sent out the articles a couple weeks ago. I'm going to try to do that on a more regular basis, so we have plenty of time. We did get some comments back. Commissioner Moss sent over some of his comments, which we have reviewed, and the zoning committee will review those in more detail as part of your suggestions. But with that, I'll turn it back over to the chairperson to see if there's questions or if there's some feedback from the PC.
Yeah, would you like to add anything?
Just very much, I think being on this committee, very much this is a work in progress. When I read through what we have before us tonight, it's a compilation of the work we did and what was submitted, but where a lot of ideas come forward. So I still see things at this point that strike me, different. So, and certainly everyone here would have ideas. I just didn't have this other comment I made to the chair that perhaps, John, for the agenda, since we have 3 specific articles before the planning commission for, it's not final draft approval, but for a big, I was kind of hoping the agenda would be a little more specific on that, like rather than just we're discussing zoning, but that articles 5, 12, and 13, will be specifically discussed. Just if someone were going to look at the agenda, it's
Okay.
just says committee update,
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
We did have all of the articles incorporated into the package,
Right.
as well as the comparison charts.
Some people might
Yeah.
go to the agenda first and then say, okay,
I can do.
So you can do that without us amending the agenda?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, I open the floor to discussion.
do you want to start on the things, or are you just general discussion now?
Well, let's start with chapter 5. General provisions. Albert.
You have my comments there, just wondering if anybody had questions on this. I was trying to understand the basement of the ADU, what that meant, how that all works. So,
The basement being used as an ADU?
yeah, so the basement has proper building part.
Yeah.
No building consisting of basement shall be erected or occupied as a dwelling unit in any zone. Then it says basements may be occupied as a dwelling unit if they have been approved as an accessory dwelling unit in Article 7 and 9 as part of the larger structure.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand. So the only way a basement could become a place for dwelling is it has to go through the ADU process.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
just I want to make sure I understood that. The other one was, I don't know if that was more of a committee can decide.
Right. I'm gonna let Carolyn, she had a comment about that.
Yeah, so the idea was we don't want someone just to inhabit a basement alone. But if you have a home and you have space in your basement to have a bedroom, you can obviously occupy it. But if you're going to rent it as a secondary, you have to get an accessory dwelling unit for that.
The other 2 comments were basically were the typos and not, so I don't think we need to discuss those. I thought it was really good that we have the open space preservation. Petoskey has some wonderful public areas. And then our need to provide more housing and more density housing. We hate to see the parkland ever be considered for development. I mean, we have some nice city parks, How many apartments can you put in Lockwood Park and Curtis Park and right down here along the waterfront? So I don't know if that's maybe a park commission thing, but I'd like to see the way that it's described in Article 4.23 is a city currently owned dedicated open space, such as things as parks. Can they be set aside through a irrevocable conveyance found acceptable? I just hate to see any of our beautiful parklands be ever considered for development. And again, I don't know if that's part of this commission, but it just kind of struck out to me, what a good statement that was.
Mhm.
So if you are developing an area, you do a development, you say this is open space, that has to be conveyed. It'd be nice to see someplace in the city, that documented that we keep these parks.
So, yeah, John, I believe that's part of this city charter that official parklands can't be
Sold
sold
without
even some degree of alteration without
the vote of the people.
a vote of the people.
And then this provision also is, it's very similar to what we did with Maple Block, where they provided the planning commission within the PD required them to put in a 10-foot wide concrete sidewalk, but it was on their property. And then the pedestrian bridge, potential pedestrian bridge connection over the Bear River, all of that was memorialized in an easement, which was prepared by them, but reviewed and signed off by the city attorney and recorded.
That's Jan.
Oh, can you put your,
On 5.8 clear vision areas. The diagram shows a 25-foot
oh, yeah,
for street intersections, but the description says 30 feet.
yeah, we found a description, whatever. There's another part where it talks about driveways where it has to be 30 feet, so we opted to make them both 30 feet. But the illustrations will change, so, ignore that for now.
That was my only comment for this section.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, again, on your.
Microphone.
Sorry. Again, following Bob's comments on general provisions, I've been more closely reading a couple of these items that I have some knowledge about. I'm suggesting a couple of revisions on 5.17 historic building preservation. The last paragraph on that page, C,
What number, line number?
that would be line 266. I believe that what we want to say there is that the purpose of the subsection and then going on, designated by the State Register of Historic Sites and I would strike Department of the Interior and just put or the National Register of Historic Places. Those two would be stated in similar ways then.
So get rid of Department of the Interior, National, and just say National. Department of the Interior, get rid of that,
Yes.
and just say National,
National Register of Historic Places.
okay.
So you've got the State Register and the National Register.
Okay,
And then in the very last line, seems a little bit redundant there where it makes reference to a tourist attraction. And then the last word before it goes to the next page is tourist industry. And so I was thinking maybe I would suggest saying to preserve the cultural, historic, and architectural nature of the city so as to benefit the city by promoting the tourism industry rather than tourist. I would say tourism industry.
all right. Okay, we'll change that to tourism.
And then at the top of the next page, paragraph D, this goes on to talk about, the types of individual or resources that are designated. And so I would recommend that paragraph D read, the historic buildings governed by this section are those composed of, and then add resources listed on the National Register of Historic Places, comma, consisting of 2 districts and 34 individual buildings, structures, and sites.
Do we want to number them? Because that could change. If we just refer to the,
No, that's a good point. That's true.
so I don't know that we should have a number there.
One of these that originally was identified has since been demolished. At least one's been demolished that I know of.
Is it still on the list?
No, it's been removed from the list.
Okay,
But you're right, the list could change.
all right, I didn't quite get that. Did you get that change? Lisa? Did you get it complete?
No.
Okay. you
Okay,
already-
I'll reread what I suggest. D, the historic buildings governed by this section are those comprised of, and then insert resources listed on the National Register of Historic Places, comma, consisting of two districts and multiple individual buildings, structures and sites or something like that, rather than 34 maybe. And then we go down to, the next paragraph, E, historic districts. And then, so that identifies the two historic districts that are being referenced. And then F just says sites. I would recommend we want to put the word individual sites,
Well,
just to be consistent with how they're stated previously.
so it probably should be individual historic sites. Would that be, or is that saying too much?
Yeah, that would be fine. Mhm.
Well,
Okay.
the title of the section is historic building preservation, so.
Some of these are actually sites, though,
Right.
in addition to. So the word resources is often used, as a generic word to include both buildings and sites. And there can be objects, there can be historic objects like statues and things like that. So typically the word resources is used. So that's why in paragraph B, I suggested adding that comprised of two.
Did you want it to be comprised or
Yep.
composed?
Comprised of,
Comprised is okay?
yeah, I think
Okay.
they're comprised of resources listed on the National Register. So those were my comments on those pages.
Okay,
Thank you.
anybody else? Max?
Yeah, forgive me for questioning this, but when you eliminated the Department of the Interior, what was the purpose of that?
Right, because you're not saying the state of Michigan State Register of Historic Sites. Or, the State Register of Historic Sites is housed in a department, I've forgotten what it's called right now, but it is a department at the state of Michigan. And you're not calling that out, so why call out the federal department that the other one is housed in? Everybody knows that the survey is by the state register and the national register, if you're dealing with historic resources.
Yeah, I was under the impression that there were strict guidelines to abide by that would add to the nature of the project or.
Well, we are talking about that in that we're saying further along here that if any of these resources are proposed to be changed, let's see, let me find it here. Yeah, paragraph A, no existing building listed on the state register of historic sites or the National Register of Historic Places shall be altered on its exterior or demolished until the impact of the proposed action has been examined by the Planning Commission after a review by a qualified professional. And that's a pretty big undertaking. That's like designating a local historic district where anybody who's going to change windows or put new roofing on or add a garage or alter their back porch would have to submit documentation of what they're proposing to do, and the Planning Commission would be reviewing it. And in most communities, they go ahead and adopt the local historic district enabling legislation that the state of Michigan has, and they appoint a separate historic district commission. And it's the historic district commission that reviews all of these proposals rather than the Planning Commission. So I've really never seen it set up in Michigan that the planning commission would review this. This would require some kind of a qualified professional. So maybe there's a consultant that the city would hire to do the design reviews of all the applicants who want to change their front door or add a front porch or add railings on their porch. All of those kind of things would need to be reviewed by somebody and a recommendation made for either the planning commission to decide or the historic district commission to decide, yes, that's an appropriate thing for you to do to your property. So it's a big lift that we're proposing here. I'm not against it, but I'm just trying to explain that it's big impact. I mean, there's a lot of buildings in the downtown district and the East Mitchell Street Historic District. You've got what, I don't know, you probably have 500 buildings that we would be, at least 500. I don't know what the number is, but that we would be, and think of all the renovations and work that gets done on places, every year. There are 4 historic districts on Mackinac Island, and they have a steady stream of, every month when the Historic District Commission meets, there's 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes more, projects that are reviewed essentially every month. And I
Did
think
you have any follow-up, Max?
I don't want to go around in circles, but it just seems like we're eliminating one more thing that could potentially help us. I don't know.
by taking out the Department of the Interior, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think so. I mean,
Even though it's-
there are no, the National Register and also the State Register being listed on either one of those or on both of those imposes no requirements to a property owner. You can tear your house down. You can tear your building down as long as you're not seeking a federal tax credit or a federal license to do it. So, anything anything downtown in our downtown district or the whole East Mitchell Street Historic District, anybody can do whatever they want to any of those properties, even though they're listed on the State Register or the National Register, as long as they're not using a federal license or any federal money to do it.
I conclude.
Okay. Rich?
Yes, line 534, the shipping containers. So that was just decided not to allow those at all because I did a little research and there's some pretty amazing designs that people are coming up with shipping containers as a building material, and that in my mind aren't aesthetically objectionable at all. Now, I would add that if we were to allow them, that there should be some design considerations or standards, if you will.
Okay.
And I can provide some examples if people are interested in.
Okay, I'm gonna have John respond to that.
I understand that some architects are starting to use more innovative design on shipping containers. However, part of this provision was to ensure that there is a industry out there that sells used shipping containers, and people have the tendency to buy them and put them in their backyard for storage, and they become a blight issue, and that was the provision for this. Now, in the future, or if the planning commission wants to investigate the use of shipping container materials as building materials, then we'd have to address that somewhere in the code to make sure that it goes through a more detailed review process. I don't have a problem with that architecturally,
Right.
but I think the provision for this was basically to curb what's happening, and I don't see it. I haven't seen it here in the city, but in some of the townships, shipping containers just kind of spontaneous appear on people's properties.
Right, I understand that is
Yeah.
a problem and that is blight,
That's what this is for.
right? Well, if this is in there, does that mean it would never change or?
No, it could change. I mean, if the planning commission wants to kind of dive into that a little bit more, certainly happy to take a look at that and figure out where we can put it, so it's got some, it's got some, we have some review capability.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That's how I would have it.
I think it's a slippery slope. If we did allow them, I think. You know, maybe one part of the city, for instance, where there's industrial stuff now. Maybe it would be appropriate there, but.
Well, if you think about it, if I'm not mistaken, over at the back lot, they use a shipping container for their outdoor bar.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that there's a use in the city already, which I don't think people find objectionable because it's integrated within a commercial development.
Mhm.
I know that
It's behind a fence.
Mark Boudet, who's an architect in Harbor Springs. Mark was part of a project in, I think, Colorado or Montana in terms of developing a restaurant. And in the restaurant, they used shipping containers as part of the refrigeration and actually in the kitchen, creating the kitchen part of the restaurant. And I saw pictures of it and it's really nice looking. But I'm not taking anything away from architects because they can be done very innovatively, but we haven't explored that part in great detail in here, other than trying to prevent them from just being used in the city as storage containers. That's right.
Albert?
I know don't know which one, but sometime this fall, there was quite a discussion at the city council about the backlot storage container from the Emma County buildings department, concerned about how that was anchored and didn't have a permit and.
Did have a proper
So,
pad.
didn't have proper pad
Yeah.
and that type of thing, so I think right now, to say nothing to be allowed until we decide. What can be allowed, because that will be a big project.
Yes,
I think I'm okay with this for now, but I also agree that if somebody wants to come through and say, we want to build this building and we want to build it out shipping container. And it's architecturally good, that would be fine, but I think not for now, just to leave it like this, since we already have a pretty heavy load. And to add one more thing to it, I think I'd be fine with it.
So John, do you feel like we're making big changes? Should we just add that to the list?
I think we could add it to the list and explore it, because I do think I kind of agree with Albert on it. I think if we're gonna do it and allow it to be used, we really need to think about what the application's gonna be and what the design parameters are gonna be. And I'm not really the only ones that I've seen are in architectural magazines. I really haven't come into one personally or professionally. So it'd be something that I would even have to research myself. But I would really kind of depend on the architects that are on and the designers that are on the planning commission to provide more of that input than myself.
One of the things to note is, you know, where they're often used in warm climates, they work pretty well. You can get the aesthetic that people are looking for, but in a climate like ours, if it's going to be a habitable space, you know, the building department's going to require insulation. And so you're either going to lose the character of the interior or you're going to lose the character of the exterior of the shipping container, one way or the other.
So what's the pleasure of the Max?
Yeah, they are quite cost prohibitive as well to haul it, and then the cost of the material, and then you're chopping apart most of it to make it a usable space. So it seems like a cladding issue rather than a shipping, but I understand where you're coming from in terms of I don't want to see it in my neighbor's backyard.
So what's the consensus about having John add it to the discussion?
Yeah. Future discussion.
But with what we're doing now, that it would be included in whatever.
Leave it as it is now, but add it for further discussion down the road.
Down the road during this process that we're doing right now.
I guess it would depend on where it fits priority wise, I guess, in terms of
Okay.
further discussion.
I think if I'm not mistaken, what Commissioner Moss was suggesting is let's keep moving through the zoning process, get that adopted, and then once that adopted, then take a deeper dive into the shipping container issue and see if we.
Right.
Okay.
Is that what you were advocating?
Yeah, and I think that the difference in using a shipping container as is versus that somebody mentioned, I think it was Rick, as a building material. And so if somebody wants to comes with a house or a commercial building, that they're using it as a building material and it meets all the building codes, I don't have a problem, but for right now, I think we can just let this one go because we
Right,
have one issue in the city right now, that's all.
okay.
Until it comes before us, then deal with it then.
So Max, you made a comment when we looked at the community college and they were using some creative stuff and you talked about the finish being compromised over a period of time.
I think this also stems back to the comment made about cladding. What the vision is, the aesthetic vision and preservation of Petoskey. Do we want a bunch of Aluka bond metal panel new construction that will surely stand our climate, or do we want clapboard cladding and traditional homes? They're kind of tied together, but I'm sorry. Circling back to the Aluka bond, yeah, I mean, it won't fade for the course of 20 years, but it's the identity. If we allow the cladding, like this new aesthetic or industrial aesthetic, it changes the entire street. If 3 of those pop up and then my house is completely cedar shake, it's no longer a historic district, it's something different. You know, if it's out of a historic district.
So I think that part of that discussion is not just that you can use the shipping containers, but also using that industrial type stuff for
The building.
for building. So it's also building material discussion, what's allowed. Okay, and anything else? Ted?
So with regard to Article 5,
Mhm.
I've got several things. And it's, again, reading this in a different light now with a little time to soak them up. Starting right at the beginning, awnings and canopies, lines 13 through 17 specifically, but that section, there was some discussion at the zoning subcommittee about why it was there. And what we were discussing was that we weren't talking so much about constructing awnings and canopies, but about the illumination of them, which is the first part. So then I was reading up for this meeting, it went on as we get to starting in line 13, awnings or canopies are prohibited in the CBD and adjacent districts unless approved by the zoning administrator. After review, plan and drawing depicting the location, appearance, and composition of the proposed awning or canopy, and finding by the zoning administrator that proposed awning will not adversely impact neighboring buildings or uses in terms of size, color, design, or obstruction of view. So initially, when we discussed this, we were talking about illumination. Then I see this part, and I've got to say, in Article 12, we'll be getting to next, we're relying on a zoning administrator to, it's right here, to follow the laws, to completeness reviews, technical reviews, things like that. We're not actually asking the zoning administrator to do the planning work. And when I see making decisions about impact on neighboring buildings in terms of size, color, design, and obstruction of view, some of that's bordering to me on discretionary type planning activities. And I just wondered, is that appropriate? And then I was thinking about, John, when we were talking about this section, we were talking more about illumination initially. So I just wonder, those are my thoughts, John. If someone's trying to decide, it's like there's 2 issues here. One's illumination, and the second part is putting awnings and canopies in the CBD and adjacent districts, and who makes that decision. And it sounds kind of like a planning type decision. I don't know if it'd be an administrative review committee seems like a small item kind of for the whole planning commission. So my concern is there's two subjects in this paragraph in the second, yeah.
I think the one thing we could take a look at is, I don't have a copy of it with me. Remember, we are thinking about using the downtown design guidelines.
Right.
And I'm not 100% sure, but I thought awnings and canopies were in there as a design element. And
To
if they
some degree, they
are, and if
yes,
they
but
are,
not to the extent that this refers to.
the second part of this paragraph could basically say that awnings and canopies in the downtown area have to comply with the provisions in the downtown design guidelines. And
Those don't get into lighting character, I don't think at all.
Well,
Those are more height above the sidewalk and the
Mhm.
appearance, the design, like being a more traditional shed style awning as opposed to rounded or bubble awnings. which
yeah,
are-
I think what Ted was getting at is the first part of 5.2 talks about illumination,
Which is fine.
which is fine. And
Yeah.
the second part talks about design. And I'm saying we could revise the second part basically to bounce it back to the design guidelines if it's in the downtown.
Right, but if it's in the downtown, but what if it's in one of the other business districts?
So, yeah, this includes adjacent districts too.
Well, so we'll have, no, I guess we're gonna have to revisit it when we have our committee meeting and dive back into it again.
Okay. I have a question on, the next one is on its clear vision areas, and it's, lines 87, 88. It's number D on 87. The zoning administrator may require a reduction in height of screening of vegetation. And I'm just trying to think about specificity, which comes into discussion at times. May require a reduction in height where necessary to ensure. Is there guidance on that, John? I mean, is that okay? It's kind of loose,
Well, I think it's,
specifically loose, or?
I think it's specifically loose. Okay, for example, I'm thinking offhand when you read it, what happens if you have a driveway that's on a slope that comes down the
Uh-huh.
street? That would block the clear vision, then the zoning administrator would have the discretion to say, wait a minute, you gotta reduce the height of the vegetation, so the car can see over the vegetation to see the clear vision area. So I think you wanna make it somewhat loose, because we can't, it's awful hard to try to nail down every particular
Okay.
instance in the community where that comes into play.
So just so everyone's aware, then what would happen is if the person said, I don't agree with the zoning administrator, then they would have to take it to the zoning board of appeals,
Exactly.
is how it would eventually iron out.
Yes.
Okay. On line 108, again, in terms of specificity and clarity, following the demo, we're on to demolition of buildings, following demolition of the structure and the removal. Debris, any excavation shall be backfilled. It talks about backfilling after something's been demolished, but it says following, but it doesn't say how soon following. I think I'd like to be a little more specific there to not just have it be. Does that make sense or not? You know?
Yes, it does. Yes.
So-
I'm gonna ask the architects on the board, if someone's demolishing a building, what do you think is a reasonable time frame that they're required to backfill the former foundation? Couple weeks, within a month? Several days?
Yeah, in large measure, I would think buildings would be demolished in order to be replaced by a new one. And so therefore it would be, the work would just continue right away. But I guess probably there could be other situations where,
What if you were just removing it
and you didn't want to replace it with.
and you had to backfill it? That's
I
what
would
this is.
say within 60 days or something like that, wouldn't you think would be an appropriate?
I would say less because it's a safety hazard for the
Yeah.
construction site.
So what would you say?
I would say within 30 days
Okay.
or less.
I mean, that's difficult because you have like that situation, where if a home burned and they anticipate rebuilding, they haven't pulled a permit. It's difficult to put a time limit on a plan because then you're burdening the owner of an additional cost of backfilling with clean soil and then they're hauling it away. So it's a waste of resources, but I think it's if it's appropriately screened and secured, you know, I don't want to end up with a situation like the pit where it sits forever, but I also don't want to burden an additional cost on the property. owner.
Maybe adding some sentence that makes a reference to safety, to cordon off the excavated area would be adequate.
But John, I was reading this as a demolition where there wasn't, like a demolition where there was a burned home in town and someone was gonna rebuild, so the hole stayed there. I wasn't thinking they had to backfill it, but I was thinking this referred to something where it was not gonna be there. And it would,
I think you have to take a look at it both ways. I know that in some communities where they have issued a citation to a blighted abandoned building, the procedure is you demolish it and haul all the debris away, and then right away the contractor comes in and fills the hole and levels it and puts grass seed down and restores the site. It's almost part of the same project.
right, and
But I think I get where Max is going, that if somebody is tearing down a building with the idea that they're gonna come back in and use the hole that's gonna be could be used as part of the foundation, why would you wanna go to the expense of requiring them to fill it in and
Right.
excavate it back out?
right.
Could that be part of the permitting process?
I was gonna say,
Determine what the purpose is.
that's what the zoning administrator as part of the permit, depending on the situation, would specify.
So you wouldn't put it in the zoning ordinance?
Well, I would, but I think what Bob is saying is that it could be what Ted is saying and what Max is saying is that when somebody comes in to take a zoning permit out to demolish a building, the zoning administrator would ask the question, is this demolishing a building to build a new building? Or are you demolishing it basically to have a vacant site? And depending on what the situation is, then the zoning permit would dictate when they have to fill the hole in.
So do we need to get rid of it for that, or I don't? So I do have some thoughts. I mean, it does seem to me if you're gonna demolish and fill in, like not replace, that you would like it and we could require it that it's a relatively quick, like you plan both at once. You don't just rip the thing, create the hole and say, well, now I gotta find someone to bring some dirt in. You should have planned that out. So
Well, I think what we need to do, again, we need to take a look at 510 and then actually carve 510 into two sections. Have demolition of a building resulting in a vacant lot and
right,
demolition of a building for new construction. And then under each of those, we'd have the conditions laid out.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Say it again?
I was gonna say, do we ever want that? Demolition of a building and then a vacant site?
Well, in some, I don't know if it's happened here.
I did it.
I don't know if it's, in some communities on small lots, if a property owner may buy a building next door that's in bad shape and they want to tear it down and then they want to make it part of their side yard. Yeah. I've seen it happen before.
But we don't want people buying up 3 lots with houses and tearing down 2 and then
That's
creating a
happened.
large yard. Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah,
So does that sound like a reasonable,
it does to me.
we'll have two different sections, one for a vacant lot, one resulting in a new building?
I think that would clarify a lot of it, because it's gonna be based on the purpose of the demolition.
right.
So then it will be 5.10 and 5.11, or is it 5.010.1?
Just adding-
I'll figure that out.
Maybe it's just adding paragraph F that deals with the other.
Yeah, it'd be 510 demolition of buildings, and then underneath that would be one that says demolition resulting in a vacant lot, demolition
Okay,
for a new building, and then
so the number won't change.
the numbers won't change,
Got
we'll just reorganize.
Okay.
Okay, Ted?
That sounds great. I like that. Very thoughtful. I like, on line 132, it's again a specificity thing. This is about driveway requirements taken over from our existing one, and on it's line 132. it's starting on the previous page, normal maintenance, blah, blah, blah. Goes on, will not trigger full off-street parking compliance, however, pulverizing an existing asphalt, concrete, or other paved surfaces, the outright removal or substantial modifications serves to, shall be considered for new parking. Substantial modifications was, again, on line 132, something I felt maybe, I don't know how to do it, but could that be better defined? It's a kind of a loose term, what substantial means. Often another, there's other places in the ordinance where we define a modification when it's substantial, more than 50% of something or something. I don't know how to do it here, but I just wanted to ask you that.
Well, we could get rid of the word substantial and say or modification of over X% of the paved surface.
That's what I thought would be more specific.
Yeah, we'll have to, at the zoning committee, decide what that percentage should be, but we could do it that way.
Continuing on, I had a question. We asked this on line 249, it's detached garages. I had asked the question at a subcommittee, and I guess when I read this, I was still a little confused. This has to do with detached garages and lots with alleys. And this says detached garages shall be accessed from an alley where one exists and is usable. And my question was, I don't know if it exists, but there could be a situation where someone's on an alley, but they have ample space. And maybe a situation where they already have it or want it, where the garage could be accessed from the front street and not the alley, and they would like to do that. This says it shall be accessed from the alley. So I asked about that, John, and I thought we said we were going to encourage that or something, but.
Yeah, what letter, what number line?
This is line 249.
Okay.
So that was my question. It seems to be like we had it before, and that's what I was worried about that.
We also have a provision in the ordinance in residential districts, you're only allowed one driveway.
Yeah, I think that's.
So that's part of the problem that we have currently is we have a lot of houses that have access off the alley. And then want to put in a driveway out front or vice versa. They have access off the front and then want to create one in the alley. Where this is saying it has to come off the alley if you have that,
Yeah.
but then you're only allowed one driveway. So otherwise then people would
Yeah.
create passes through potentially,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've never lived on an alley, so I don't have experience, but it does seem like some of them are a little tight. And for some applications, although you could access a garage from the alley, if you had the option to not do that, it might be a lot friendlier and kinder for vehicles and things to use a garage that was, I don't know. So, I don't know what other people think about that.
I think it totally depends on the property. If there's room to get a driveway to a back area, I think it's personal preference for access, but.
Well, you can replace the word shall with may. Then that's the discretion.
So I have this particular issue and we anticipate accessing our garage from the alley. However, we have an accessory dwelling unit and we have planned, and has been there for 100 years, a driveway from both ends. And we anticipated our accessory dweller to use that front parking space. Now we'll be removing the paving, which will effectively put me in this category, and it'll cause congestion at the rear of our property. So how do we mitigate that while I'm in favor of accessing all properties that have the ability from the alley, because it creates continuity and structure with the streetscape? It's going to be an issue for me to have to move my vehicle every time my tenant wants to leave.
Well, I think if, like I said, if we change the word shall to may, that it provides that flexibility.
Yeah, but where is the rule that you can only have one driveway, Lisa? Yeah, So where is that? Do you remember?
It's under driveway report.
Is it further in?
Right here.
I'd have to look.
511.
I don't have a memorized there. I don't think that got changed.
Is it? Yeah.
Driveway requirement,
511.
yeah. So that's line 120 is where it starts.
I think it's under. It's actually under, I think it's under a different section.
Yes.
I don't see it here.
It's under a different section. I think it's under general regulations.
Well, that's what we're in. General
Maybe
provisions.
it's further down than it's, I know in the. I'm used to looking at online versions.
I think the other part of trying to encourage parking off the alley, if you do have a garage. Or even if you don't have a garage, encouraging parking off the alley, especially in the winter time
Mhm.
with the seasonal winter. On-street parking restrictions, it makes it easier for DPW to. Snow remove on the streets and everything, if you have access to a parking area off the garage. You don't necessarily have to have a garage. As long as you have an alley, you can have you're parking off the alley. But
Well, I think what we'll do is. Where were we in this discussion?
So I was going through a long list of things that I had.
I know, but what number, what were we just talking about? What number?
249,
Thank you.
lots with alleys.
Alright, so lots,
You suggested May
Yeah,
instead of
please.
shall.
yeah, I've got that. 2 entrances. Alright, so I'm just putting it there that that's something we will deal with at the committee level. And maybe by then, we'll know where it exists.
So
Yes, keep going.
so my next one was, I just wanted the full commission to be aware, it's basically line 286, it's livestock and wild game, and I did present this to the subcommittee and didn't get any traction. I'm not gonna die on this hill, but this is prohibiting basically livestock and wild game in the city, and I just had to point out that in our action plan of our master plan action items, allowing for backyard chickens was in that as an action item. So we struggled with that because we did realize that we wouldn't just exempt that or say you can have chickens, that it would have to be a little better thought out. So the question was kind of like the other item we discussed tonight, like the containers. You'd have to think this through a little bit. So we didn't, I just want the planning commission at this point to know, we didn't allow for chickens, even though it's in our master plan as an action item. And the discussion was, if we do it, we'd have to think about it and now we did have a sample ordinance some years ago in the city, which seemed reasonable at the time, although some people didn't want it, so we didn't do it, but anyway, so I just want people to be aware of that. So everyone's aware of that, so.
Any response to that?
Of course, the price of eggs just went up, so.
any fowl friendly people here on the planning commission?
Right. On line 311, John, I have a question. I'm trying to understand, we always struggled with this exterior storage of vehicles, boats, and trying to think of all the implications of these. 311 letter E, no parking overnight on any street, alley, highway, or public space for exterior storage of motor vehicles. So I guess, was it the word storage, John? One way I read this is you can't park your car overnight on any street, but this doesn't, you feeling like storage is the title of this 5.21 is different than.
Yeah, this deals with, boats, machinery, RV vehicles, things along those lines.
Well, it says motor vehicles.
Well, let me look here.
So that's what I'm a little worried about. It seems to say you can't park your car on the street overnight.
I think it's like meant to address longer term
storage rather than overnight.
Yeah, that's why it says overnight though, that's one night. So. That's what I'm a little worried about in this section. Might have to think about that.
I have a question.
I have Carolyn, then you, Albert.
I think our discussion for category E was for campers and overnight camping in public spaces, is to eliminate that.
So a number of people, if you could right around Tasky, they had their camper or their boat or whatever in their driveway, front yard. Is that, I'm trying to read this and make sense of that. Does that mean you can't have a boat in your driveway? Because that is common practice. I think of at least 3 houses in our neighborhood that have a boat or a camper in the yard. Park there while they're not staying in it, they're just parking it there.
Right.
until
A number, line 295, no motor vehicle shall be kept, parked or stored in any district unless it shall be in an operating condition and properly licensed or kept inside a building. No motor vehicle shall be parked in any front yard or corner side yard except upon a driveway. So if it's on a driveway, it's allowed. And I agree with that. We don't want people putting that on their lawn.
So, yeah, John, I'm just concerned with this E. It's not getting at what we want to get at. We don't want to get at people parking the car overnight in front of their house. But it kind of reads that way.
Okay.
So I've got it noted that we'll talk about that at the
All right.
committee meeting. So moving on.
There was a couple more things I noticed. On line, John, we're in the swimming pools, 553, line 553. Says the swimming pool shall not encroach into a required side yard and the rear yard setback shall be a minimum of 15 feet. A couple of things, I would just say, instead of the swimming pool, I would say, a swimming pool. Or since this thing is swimming pools, you could just start this with shall not encroach onto a required side yard.
Okay.
And then the second part is a different item about rear yard setbacks. I would separate those two out because one's about side yard. I'd put a different number, just to the second half of this sentence could be another number just because it's a different. It's a rear yard setback versus
Okay.
side.
So there's gonna be 4. And number 3 is gonna be
Yeah.
rear yard. When it comes to, it shall be a minimum of 15 feet. Don't we have 25-foot setbacks in rear yards?
But you would allow.
25 primary
But
structure.
you'd let.
Primary structure.
To be in that. You wouldn't, this allows you to have a pool to be 15 feet from the rear property.
Okay,
And sometimes you have to do that because if, regardless of where utilities are located on the property.
It becomes an accessory use.
okay.
John, on line 559, temporary buildings and uses for periods not to exceed 1 year. As I read this, temporary buildings and uses are allowed for periods not to exceed 1 year. I was going to add are allowed there. I thought it would be better. Then when I got down to this section on 578 temporary structures, it didn't even make sense to me what we were talking about as I read it. It says temporary structures, all setbacks, land coverage, off-street parking, lighting, and other requirements to be considered in protecting the public health, safety, peace, morals, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the city of Petoskey shall be made at the discretion of the zoning administrator. I don't even know what this means.
That's right out of the current code.
Right, but,
I repeat, I don't know what it means.
right,
That's why we're here. It's like,
right.
how does it, that doesn't talk anything about temporary structures, the next line, it just talks about the peace and welfare of the health, morals and comfort.
Well,
Do you know what it means? I don't.
I think what it's saying is all temporary structures, have to follow probably what's in that zoning, whatever it is.
Is that meant to be like a tent or something like that?
Mhm.
So they have to, so temporary structures have to follow the rules of setbacks, land coverage, off-street parking, lighting.
So if you're having a
And
wedding,
other requirements to be considered protecting.
So I may ask, maybe John, if you could look at that and then line 585, number 2 is equally mystifying. In classifying uses, so this is a thing on temporary structures. Then it says in classifying uses is not required capital improvements, the zoning administrator shall determine that they are either demountable structures. So I've got structures and I've got uses, and I'm just again confused about this whole paragraph, what it's saying in meaning. So if you could look at those two
Okay.
and see if it makes any sense.
I think it's like if you were gonna have a wedding reception in your backyard and you
Yeah.
were erecting a tent and that sort of thing.
Just,
Okay.
that's all I've got, sorry.
Right.
So the other,
Can I just add?
Rich?
Yeah, well, yeah, because we really didn't address the fact that they can be set up for a year. I mean, that's kind of confusing. What temporary structures would be up for a year as opposed to a tent for a wedding?
I think we talked about at the committee, a temporary structure, for example, would be a construction trailer on a site,
Yeah.
things like that.
Although I think that was
Under the next
well within
section.
another,
that would be temporary structure.
That would be 5.36.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, temporary, yeah.
yeah, that's where that was. I think we just,
What did you say, Max? Oh, Albert, what did you say?
I just think the whole thing needs to be elaborated and not restricted business here. That's why we got the zoning subcommittee.
right,
Yeah.
Unless somebody has other input on this. It sounds
All
like
the,
committee will have a hand on it. And we'll see what we can bring back.
yeah,
I would agree. Yeah, two of the, we were just talking here, examples of temporary structure, for a period not to exceed a year. Is the tent that goes up during the summer at the back lot. They have to,
Oh, right.
they have to get a permit and only stay up, they have to take it down. And then he's not here, Charlie's curling.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That's a temporary, that's a temporary structure.
And we also discussed that the county ultimately permits the
Permits,
temporary
yes.
structures, so we want it in the ordinance, but ultimately it defaults to the county for issuing those
Correct.
permits. So it's kind of a check and balance for us.
All right. So we have marching orders for chapter 5.
Cynthia,
Yeah.
I realized I've got one more topic that I wanted to raise a question about, and that is
So what line are we?
5.24 permitted height exceptions. Would be line 487.
Oh, right, yep.
Do we want to consider things other than what are listed here? Like, typically elevator, roof enclosures may penetrate the top of a roof. Should that be allowed as a permitted height exception? An elevator enclosure or enclosures for mechanical equipment. What about, should we be referencing it? We talk about chimney, should we be talking about flagpoles or isn't that really?
Those are more regulated in the sign ordinance.
Okay. And then the other thing I thought, I know on Mackinac Island, their zoning ordinance allows things like turrets and cupolas that are on Victorian houses, you know, to be taller than the height of the overall house is allowed to be, as long as that amount of area is less than a certain percentage of the floor underneath. And on Mackinac Island, it's 20%. So if a corner turret were less than 20% of, let's say, the second floor of the house, then they allow it to go higher than the maximum allowable height for the structure itself, but no more than 6 feet above the maximum allowable height of the structure, just as an example.
Rick, you're talking about fairly detailed. I mean, I get what you're saying. These are more structures you're talking about. Chimneys, church spires. I mean, these are, I feel like, self-limited and like they don't have big mass to them. Whereas when you start getting into structures of buildings like turrets and.
Well, that would be, you know, typically a turret would probably be smaller than a church spire.
No, but you're gonna have to specify all this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm just raising the question,
Yeah.
you know, should there be other exceptions than what are listed here?
I don't know if that would fall in a definition of some type.
I feel like these fell in here because, for better or worse, maybe me, and I don't know if the other people on the committee felt like you didn't need to define the dimensions of these items and you were generally okay with them. But some of the things you're getting into sound like you'd want some dimensional limits. Obviously, because you've said that.
Right,
So that's a more complicated section.
right.
And I agree that this is our general provisions, where specifically in residential, we could say something to that, you know, for
That's
specific
true, yeah,
architectural
approach it
details.
that way. Mhm. Okay, yeah, that does sound like it would be getting too specific under general provisions.
I do like the enclosure for mechanical equipment though.
Yeah, I think that's should be spelled out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else on chapter 5? Carolyn?
I want to go back on the permitted height exception, because do we want people asking for greater height for mechanical, or do we want it to stay within our height restriction?
Well, I think the way it works now is we have a maximum height. And our rule is it doesn't count elevators and machinery. But I don't know that it's spelled out in but that is the common interpretation for builders is you do the maximum height, that's where the roof is. And then these other things don't count. So Traverse City had a big controversy because people thought they were agreeing to a certain height, say it was 60 feet.
Right,
And then they got very upset when the elevator shaft thing was above that.
right.
And I think the judge actually ruled in favor of the population because I misunderstood it. Albert?
The view shed asking is so important. So I would like this to be very clear, however we do it. And my thing would be whatever the maximum height in the neighborhood. That we decide on once we go through all the other residential districts. That it's easy to understand. So we're saying if something could be 25 feet, then that's it. If it could be 33 feet, that's it. Because then especially our citizens, they're not builders, they're not architects. They feel that their neighborhood or their business district or everything is only gonna be so high. Now you can put a cooling tower. I've seen cooling towers go into our community college, and if you look at what's on top of the Northern Michigan Hospital, there's almost a whole story just for cooling. And so I'd like to see whatever we do with light be clear. And that's just my bias. I don't know. I see a lot of that in the other commissioners. That's what my bias would be.
So to clarify, what you're saying is you don't want to make an exception.
I do
for-
not want to make exceptions.
Okay, so we should just take that out of.
Well, and another one I've been concerned about are downtown commercial buildings where, you know, they're at the maximum number of stories, but then an owner wants to put a rooftop patio up there. You know, well, then you've got to access it. You've got to have at least one or maybe two means of egress. which means stairways that penetrate the roof. Then there's, you've got to have some kind of railing, guardrails around there. Well, that constitutes almost adding part of the story right there.
But we don't currently allow that, do we?
No,
Right, I just wanted to.
Right.
but it has come up as a request to consider.
Right. And
So-
Some people just do it.
some buildings, yeah,
And some people just do it.
Right,
It's done.
Exactly.
It's been done.
So John, I guess my inclination is to stick with what's common, which is you have a maximum height and then those accessory things don't get counted. What is your thinking
They
on
are
that?
within it. They
They
have
have
to
to stay
be,
within
it's a
the
restriction, yeah.
Okay,
It
I don't,
would be
you
an
know,
exception.
think about it, if it's within the maximum height and it's a church. And they have a steeple, that's almost like you're taking the height of the steeple and you're forcing the church to be almost a one-story church.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I would rather say that churches or chimneys, spires, public monuments for wireless transmission or enclosures for mechanical equipment. Provided that the administrative review committee or planning commission, not may, shall specify a height for any such structure above the permitted height of the district. So if somebody is gonna build some of these, wireless transmission tower, cooling tower, mechanical equipment, church spire, they have to come before the planning commission, and the planning commission review it and approve it. Otherwise, I think you're almost artificially reducing the buildable height of buildings if somebody has to put an elevator shaft in.
right.
But they could do a bottom hydraulic system where they wouldn't
Yeah,
necessarily.
they
have
could,
to
but
go.
you know, what happens if they, in an area that has high bedrock? I mean, it's very expensive. They go to the top coming down. I mean, I don't think you don't wanna artificially require people to compress their building footprint, which is kind of counter to what some of the things in the master plan are about trying to, you know, create a walkable community that you don't want to force people to spread everything out. I think you can keep it in here, but any of these activities, which are very few, you know, how many churches are being built today? All right, and wireless transmission towers and mechanical equipment, if somebody's gonna do it, then they have to come before the planning commission and show their plans and get evaluated, and that's where you can make your decision.
Okay, so we're gonna have to rewrite this.
So do we even have it?
relative to wireless transmission towers, there's also the question of wireless transmission equipment,
Yeah.
which sits on roofs, like, you know, the Perry Hotel has had all sorts of stuff piled on the roof up there with wireless stuff that has definitely affected views from farther up the hill.
Most of the items in here, like church fires and those types of things, make sense to allow an exception. Really, the biggest one that raises my thing for me is the cooling towers. Just because I've seen how the mechanicals, I just seen how much that can add to the height of the building. So we say a building is in its own is 33 feet. And they had a 17-foot cooling thing, which is very easily. I just don't, that one I have probably an issue with, because they can figure out other ways to recoup it. And I understand spreading out those types of things, but we also we gotta think about the development. And I know that's important. I know we need to develop our city. We also have to think about our citizens that live here. And we have to think about our tourist industry. And as you know, I've always been when you come down that hill and see the bay, that is one of our precious commodities in town. And anything that's gonna drop that precious commodity, I'm gonna be speaking against, and if you can agree with me now, I will always speak out against that.
Okay, all right, anything else on chapter 5? Shall we move on? I was thinking this meeting was gonna be short. I'm naive.
Well, that was the tough article. I think the other two are more straightforward.
Yeah. Yes, and we spent a lot of time on chapter 5. All right, moving on to chapter 12. So how about this time? Let's try going page by page and see where that takes us. So starting with. Well, they don't have page numbers, lines 1 through 40. Any discussion?
I just, no change. I just really like this. We don't have this currently. We specify what the zoning administrator does to a degree, but line 19, under no circumstances zoning administrator permitted to make changes in this ordinance due to various terms in carrying out the zoning administrator's duties. So we're just making it real clear that the zoning administrator is carrying out the laws, not making the laws, and that's good.
Okay. Moving on to line 41 to 85.
You have my comments there.
I do.
In my big thing, I was trying to envision myself walking in, meeting up there, and we put in a filter. And so if I had to put in a filter, it says here, I have to go to the treasurer and get signed off on taxes and all my bills are paid off. It seems like that could be very easily be part of the whole application process. You know, so that on the application, the slide that says, you know, the treasurer is going to sign off, but those are paid, and then it goes forward. I don't have to wait. The applicant doesn't have to wait. Okay, that got done. Now I have to come back and give Lisa another form. I'll leave it up to you guys to do that however you want, but it just seems like that would be. It looked like a two-step process, but it didn't need to be.
John?
Yeah, I think that 12.4 basically just states that the city treasurer's got to sign off on this. I think what you're getting at, Albert, is that the application could have two parts. First part would be that they get signed off by the treasurer. Second part is then it goes to the zoning.
Right, and it just has to be routed without going back to that.
Yeah, that'd be something administratively, you know.
But I guess my concern would be if they didn't have things paid off and they were rejected, then would there be more to it if you were having them fill out an application and just part of that application was sending it to the treasurer and getting it signed? Seems like that clearance would be a good thing to do right away before you start doing any paperwork.
Yeah,
To confirm that.
I think on the application, I'm trying to envision it, would be that you give somebody the application, the first part says that in order to process the application, there has to be certification from the city treasurer that all fees and taxes are current.
Okay, so Lisa doesn't have to spend time with them,
No,
or you just point, say, do this first, and then you can come back.
then bring your application down and drop it off to Lisa.
Okay,
And I think most people are going to know whether they have
Whether
taxes or not.
or not.
So that'll
Well,
maybe
okay.
encourage.
okay, so do we need it's a matter of change, do we need to change?
No, I don't think we need to change it. I think it's what Albert was bringing up was kind of a procedural, internal procedural idea of trying to make it part of the same integrated application.
Okay. All right, anything else on that page? Yeah, all right, page 80, finding number 86 through 129. Moving on to 130 to 175.
So I have a question here. Basically, we're at line 169, voiding permit. Any permit granted under this section shall become null and void after 1 year from the date of granting such permit unless the development proposed shall pass its first construction code inspection. So my question is, and this has come up recently, how does this happen? I mean, that's the rule, but are they notified? Is there initial? When they've got a permit, does the permit say they've got 1 year? So initially, because this becomes very important. And then if it does say 1 year, should they receive a notification just prior, 2 weeks, 1 month, whatever? Again, we're trying to protect the city and everyone from knowing when the 1 year's up and being very, very clear on this 1 year thing.
Well, I think on the first part, I would recommend that we state any permit granted under this section shall become null and void after 1 year from the date of granting such permit, period. And get rid of unless the development proposed shall have passed first construction code inspection.
Yeah.
So I would recommend getting rid of that.
But yet to some specificity, it shall become null and void.
1 year from the date of granting.
What do they have to do in 1 year though?
What they have to do, well, we issue the zoning permit.
Right.
They have to get the zoning permit's good for a year. Within that year, they can go to the Emmett County Building Department if they're building a storage shed, and they'd have to get their permit from the county building department. On our end, the zoning permit would only be good for a year unless they did that.
So they don't, do they have to, my question is very specific, do they have to start? Do they have to get a building permit? What exactly do they have to do in 1 year? Because it's gotta be crystal clear.
How do you handle it, Lisa?
They has to start construction.
They have to start construction within a year.
So again,
That's what that needs.
when we said start construction, because I've been involved in these discussions before in this city, someone can take a shovel and move dirt and say, there, I did something. So some people like not just the term starting construction, they like a permit, you know.
Well, I think the way you had it,
This was very specific, because
Yeah.
not only did they have to start, but they had to get far enough that they had to have a construction inspection, so it's.
That's a pretty big milestone.
That is, when I read it, that was a real big.
Right. In 1 year, it might be too much, maybe the period should be longer or the trigger softer, but. You know, do they have to get their building, I don't know enough to do what the county says, get their building. Permits, something, there must be something that we can verify that they have to do other than starting construction is so weak. It's not, you know.
With the issuance of a building permit, that's the trigger.
I mean, that would be having to follow up. We don't have a building department.
And that'd be hard for us to follow up.
And then you'd have to follow up on every application that came through. I mean, it's just one of those things that could easily be.
But it's
no
no,
trigger for it.
it's no good having it here if we can't, it doesn't mean anything if we can't enforce it.
But for example, the development that was gonna happen where Family Video is, their zoning permit has expired twice or 3 times, so they
Right.
had to come back to
Right.
us, yeah. So if it expires and they haven't gone for a building permit from Emmett County, then if they try to apply for a building permit, they first need an approved zoning permit
Yeah.
from us before the county will give them a building permit.
The problem is
It
if
is.
they have a building permit and they really haven't started and then Lisa calls them and then some guy goes out with a shovel and says, okay, I just started construction here. There's a pile of dirt. I moved 1 shovel. Okay, I just started.
Well, I would think that the county, the building department would also have a regulation on their building permit for when construction has to start. And then the overlap of ours, one's gonna expire. And then theirs will expire, and then it's gonna be a process that would happen all over again.
Lisa,
Right, building permits expire as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what their time frame is and how that coincides with ours.
I believe it's 1 year.
I think it's about a year as well.
I'm okay with how it's written at this point, but I leave it up to the commission.
do you wanna do this at the committee? No?
Yeah, because that means you're not okay. I mean, it's gotta be clear. This gets into litigation and ugliness.
Is that a question for the city's attorney then to review that section?
It could be, or. But maybe just staff can,
Well, see, we handle, Lisa handles the zoning permit.
Right.
The county building handles the building permit. It's gonna be administratively tough. Right, to follow up on every zoning permit to make sure that they've taken out a building permit. I mean,
Mhm.
when you think about it, we're not just talking houses or commercial buildings, we're talking fences and
so.
storage sheds and everything else.
So just thinking out loud here, John, could they be required within that year to show you that they've obtained a building permit? In other words, Lisa would simply say, I'm calling you, your 1 year's up, you haven't submitted your building permit to me. Do you have one? Yes or no? Yes, you're fine. No,
Say on an average year, that's 45 permits. Last year was 107. So I mean, it's one of those things. And they don't all fall on the same day. It could be literally be, you know, several days and then it could be a few weeks. I mean, so it'd be a daily process almost to go through individual applications to find out when they expire and then contact them. I mean, it's just, that's time that I don't know where it could be found. To have to contact the county and get a listing of. You know,
What if you required that when they get the building permit, they have to come to the city and
Yeah.
hand in a,
And what if they don't?
yeah,
See, that's the issue. I mean, if the city had a building department, there's, you know, depending on what programs, a lot of communities use BSNA software and it integrates with the building department. So when Lisa issues a zoning permit, it's logged to BSNA. And then when they come and get the building permit, that's logged in BSNA. And the program is able to compare dates to see if anyone's expired or not taken out, but
We don't have that.
we don't have that. And we only issue the zoning permit and then the county issues the building permit. I think part of the other problem here that Lisa had mentioned is when she took over the zoning permit or the zoning administration, was that there was a lot of zoning permits that were issued that were people never followed up on getting building permits. They got the zoning permit, they paid the money, and then nothing ever happened.
so they didn't build it?
Yeah, so I mean, then we have to have.
So John, what if we put in here, and I get what you're saying, I know there obviously, it's not even AI, it's just a computer program that is set up to handle this kind of data, but short of having that, would it be helpful to have language that said, if we give you this zoning permit, you must within 1 year provide us with your building permit in 1 year's time, or your zoning permit will be void. Now, we might not know it on day one, but we would notify them they have 1 year, and we notify them that it's their responsibility to give to Lisa the building permit, or they will be void.
Well, let's think about the process. Let's think about the process. I'm a property owner and I want to do a renovation on my house. I'm the one that comes to Lisa and says, you know, I want to do this. And I'm the one that gets the zoning permit.
Right.
Then I get to my contractor and I say, okay, I got my zoning permit. Here it is. Now, because you got the zoning permit, now you can go over and get your building permit. Well, sometimes the builder gets the building permit unless I'm specifically tell him, when you get your building permit, you got to make sure I get a copy of it so I can notify the zoning. I just see that there's going to be lack of communication and what you're trying to achieve is not going to be achievable.
I see that could fall through the cracks, but I would state if it were that clear, if they actually had a building permit in 1 year, it would be probably hard to say it probably wouldn't be the appetite of the city to say we're nullifying your zoning permit because you basically complied. But should they not have that permit, it would be crystal clear that they were not only to get the permit, but to provide it to Lisa. So it wasn't her responsibility to notify them 2 weeks or a month ahead that you've only got 2 weeks left and you better get your building permit. And no one told me, they told me I had a year, but they should have told me. This is how stuff goes legally. It's very clear, it's your responsibility. So if she gets, it's 14 months later and someone's asking a question, she looks it up. No building permit here, she gives them a call, yeah, we don't have one. I just think it's a lot stronger than to say, so you don't have one, we sent you the notice when you approved, you had 1 year. We told you you had to get us the building permit or you would be expired. And you didn't do that and you still don't have one, so you're expired. I just think it's more clear.
We could be expiring permits that are actually valid because the property owner didn't submit a building permit.
Well, you would get a call or complaint or something, I don't know, or someone would be asking and you would call them and they would actually have it. So.
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't get.
Well, if they don't have it, then they should be expired because that's what I want.
But I don't have notice of it. If they
Right.
can provide that to me
Right.
and I look at it and go, okay, it's been a year, but I don't have a building permit and then I void it, that I'm now voiding something that potentially
I would
is a permit.
probably contact them before I voided it. It would be a better
It's
process.
gonna be a daily thing to have to go through all those applications. That's just not,
It's, it's kind of administratively, it's gonna be a lot of work on the staff to track all this.
And not all zoning permits require a building permit.
That's correct.
Correct, yes.
So, but if we end up with something here that's not enforceable, this is, I think, pretty tried and true. Don't make rules that you can't enforce, like, what are we doing?
Well, I think it's easier to say that any zoning permit under this section is null and void after 1 year of the date of granting such permit, period. Because I don't do it, Lisa does it, when she approves a zoning permit, a copy goes to the Emmett County Building Department. Now, if Emmett County Building Department, when somebody finally comes in for a building permit and they look at the zoning permit and see it was issued 3 years ago, I think the cue would be for them that, hey, your zoning permit expired. Because on the zoning permit, you put the expiration date. So that's where the key, that's where the compliance is at.
And that is already on the paperwork or
At the
the,
very top.
okay.
Yeah, it's literally the permit number and right underneath it says this permit expires.
So if that's crystal clear with the county,
It's the very first page that they receive.
And the county is pretty receptive to that. I mean, that's how all the other townships,
Yeah,
that's how the other townships do it. Right at the top, it says this permit expires on this date. So
So-
they compare.
so do you have an understanding of then what's the process? So the applicant has now come and trying to get this building permit, and the county is aware that the zoning permit has expired, so we need to close the loop here, so
they would notify the applicant that they would have to get a new zoning permit. They've done that. Because I've had people call and they're like. well,
so they just wouldn't approve the building
No.
permit and say you gotta get another.
Right.
So it sounds like after all this discussion, we don't have a problem if the county gets that.
Right.
Everything, even the stuff that you don't need a building permit for, they get every zoning permit that I.
We're looking at that, which isn't hard to do.
Mhm.
But they get zoning permits not only from the city, but all the townships. So everything where a zoning permit is issued automatically gets sent over to the county.
And it's also a public record, so if your neighbor was doing something, you could go onto the Emmett County website and look up building permits and it'll pop up and you'll see if there was a permit for work to start or not, so.
I've done this in the 6 years I've been, at least plus the country ones 2 or 3 times. But some places get closed because every time I've done a building permit, and closed my zoning permit, it was done. Someone from the city came out, and looked at my property and decided to reassess it. So we know they get closed. So, I mean, I think it's all being done. And I think most of it could be committee business if it needs to be formalized a little closer.
Okay. Shall we move on to line 176 to 212? Shall we move on to number
I wish
13?
all the articles were that easy.
I know,
I do have one final comment.
okay,
And it's kind of been 5.7. But we had, 2 of our neighbors, when all the stuff came up with. Concerned about, I talked about things that were supposed to have been done. And not been done, so when Days End was built way back when it was. Whatever it was, they went, whatever, there was fencing and, shrubbery and stuff was supposed to be done, it was never done. Trees were supposed to be planted behind the apple tree again, it was never done. So, how,
That's the performance guarantee.
that's for part entry, and is that covering 12?
Yes.
And so that will be looked at closer now?
No, it's actually covered. The performance guarantee is in,
5.7?
it's in the, where's performance guarantees?
That was in there.
Well, performance guarantee, 12.3, right at the,
Just want to make sure
Yeah.
it's clear that,
yes.
in my mind, occupancy or nothing should be allowed.
That's correct, but that's why on some projects. And my experience is it's typically commercial projects. The things that get done last or not at all are screening, landscaping. Anything outside the building, the contractor and the owner for a commercial building all try to get everything done so they can get their temporary occupancy permit. Then they say, we'll do the rest of it later. A lot of times it's not done. I mean, look at the problems that we had with Bay Street Urgent Care with getting the fence up.
Right, and that's the problem we had blown down.
Correct.
They put
So-
some panels back up, but yeah, there's still some.
But that's where a performance guarantee is. In fact, a performance guarantee is in Article 12, but the performance guarantee also shows up in the site plan review. That the planning commission has the ability, the discretion to issue a performance guarantee based on Article 12. So it's in there.
So it's something as we look at sites, we should remember,
Right,
So
because I can see that in the check.
because that needs to be, yeah, if you want to do it, it's got to be in the
So
motion.
John, you don't, or maybe we had this discussion, I'm trying to remember, you don't feel that the occupancy permit should not be issued if there's substantial undone items like this?
That's correct.
You feel you should let them occupy it, but there's,
No, not
Perform-
necessarily. That's a decision that we can make here in conjunction with the building department. So
okay,
that's where the collaboration comes in between Emmett County Building and the zoning administrator.
Okay,
Is that if it looks like we're gonna have an issue, then we would call up Emmett County and say, hold off on the occupancy until we get assurance that these other components are gonna be done in a timely manner.
okay.
all right, moving on to Article 13. Number line 3 to 42. Line 43 to 90. Line 91 to 134. Line 135 to 180. I have a question on line 160, 164. In addition to any limitations, word or, shouldn't that be of, in addition to any limitations of use or development of the property?
Yes.
Okay.
First or should be up.
Pardon me?
First or should be up.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, line 181 to 227.
So when I read this time, I was reading the conditional rezoning because it's always a little bit confusing, but I do understand it kind of. But I was looking for exactly this process, line 190, and I felt, John, that should be at the beginning of the section, because I was wondering if we should move that right to the beginning of the conditional rezoning 13.2 section. Because I couldn't understand the process when finally I got to it, and it seemed backwards, but maybe you don't think that, I don't know.
It doesn't matter. I think
I guess-
we could do that. It's not.
Well, don't we? We don't usually start with process.
We usually don't.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'd rather keep it in the
Okay.
same format
that's fine.
as everything else. Would it help if there was more of an introduction to?
Yeah, that's when I started, I was really unclear, because that statement of, an election to submit a conditional rezoning shall be pursuant to the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act as amended in this section. It just didn't,
Okay, maybe
it's kind of
we,
a weak start to what,
yeah.
but I don't know. General, John, could you do any brief general statement paragraph about basically what a conditional rezoning
Yeah,
is?
second, take a look at that.
That might be nice.
Well, we did 135 to 180. Now we're on 181 to 227. And moving on to 228, 270.
So I had a couple of these similar type of questions on line 240 and 244 that had to do with expiration. And there was the term substantial construction on those, both of those lines, 240 and 244. So that bothered me a little bit because it's a little bit vague, quite vague. And then also on 245, or if current construction and development did not proceed diligently to completion thereafter, proceed diligently to completion. I just didn't know, John, again, sometimes we've done percents or different things, if there was some way we could quantify.
I'll take a look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then moving on to 271 to 307. I believe we have closure. Right. We're going on, normally we try to be done by 8.
Yeah,
Do you want to postpone
I
that?
would say let's postpone.
Yeah. Is everybody in agreement to that? So line item 5. We'll put on hold.
We'll have it at the next meeting.
Something to consider prior to then on your number 2. It says skull and mass.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Scale and mass.
Scale and mass, yes.
Just
Thank you. Good catch.
I just wonder if we have a couple numbers in the audience here, if they came from that.
Right. Did anybody want to speak about the line 5 through 5, 12, and 13 of the zoning ordinance? Anybody on the phone? Want to make a comment? No, that's next.
Yep, I got somebody with their hand up there.
Oh, and went down. It went fast enough.
There we go. She's back up.
So please state your name and your address for your comment.
My name is Allison Patton. My address is 602 East Lake. Maybe this is not the right time during this meeting to put this forth to you, but I wanted to express to you as an attorney that I think the process that you're using is flawed in that you are not using red line documents. And just to be clear about what I mean when I say red line, you're not using documents that show here's the existing language in the current ordinance. Here is new language that would be added. Here is language in the existing ordinance that would be stricken, which is typically done by dashes through it. And then, of course, there's other things you can do in a red line too. In certain sections, you can say this is going to get moved someplace else. Other areas, you can say this section is going to be discussed later. And this is not just a technicality. I actually took some time today looking at the current ordinance provisions against what you have looked at today. And there were a number of areas where there is existing ordinance language that is not being picked up in the documents that you're working with today, yet is not being shown as stricken. So for example, under 5.2, dealing with awnings, there's current language in the zoning ordinance under section 3.17 that has to do with awnings that are either over a public right of way or over a sidewalk. That is not addressed at all. And at the same time, you're not showing in your document that you mean to delete that. Another one was driveway requirements. Under 5.11, your document only captures current section 1704A and B. It omits additional driveway language found in, 1704 C, D, E, F, and G. And again, the document is not showing that you mean to omit that, yet it does omit it. Another one was under 5.13 fences. The current ordinance has reference to a figure 1712 and also shows the figure. That has been omitted without showing that you meant to delete it. Another one was 5.22. This whole area is addressed in current ordinance section 1702. And what was omitted, even though you've highlighted it to show that, oh, this is current language. In fact, you don't have all the current language because you missed 17027. Now, maybe that was intended to be omitted, but if it's intended to be omitted, then a proper red line document would show it's stricken so that anybody can see what the intention is. Another one was 5.33 signs. So in your document, you've got signs will be regulated as provided in Appendix C, but above and beyond Appendix C, currently in Appendix A, there's some language regarding signs, section 3303, section 1502, section 3302. And this is just as far as I got with it today. And I think that this is really a flawed process that is going to give you problems later. And it's flawed because let me, as a side note, say, I do very much appreciate the very thoughtful work that you're doing, but I do think that you should be working from a red line document. You really are changing the law here. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at, we're not just creating new law. We're not working from a blank slate. We have existing law, and the proper procedure, whether it's an ordinance, a statute, what have you, is that the documents you're working from should show us all of the current law, and then what you are proposing to add, what you're proposing to delete, what you're proposing to move, what you're proposing to discuss later. And the time to do this is now. Maybe someone's going to tell me, oh, Allison, we plan to do that later, like before it goes to council or something like that. But even that would not be the appropriate process because we have a zoning committee, we have the planning commission, and then we have council. And all three entities should be working from the same proper document. So it really would make sense to start doing that now. And it not only is going to make sure that you don't miss something. I mean, as I just gave you just a limited list of things that had been omitted in the document you have. And did you mean to omit it? Maybe that was accidental. Doing the red line process is how you ensure that you're not going to miss some existing language, and then it ends up being omitted and there was no intention to omit it.
Okay. We have worked with red line documents. It's been very difficult because we are changing a lot of it, but I'm going to have John respond to that.
Yeah, this is not I want to say a revision to the existing ordinance. This is a complete rewriting of a new code. And what we've tried to do is pull sections out of the old ordinance that we wanted to carry over into the new ordinance. But in addition to that, the old ordinance over the years, it's over 50 years old. Some of the provisions are scattered throughout the code in different articles, and this was an opportunity to reorganize articles, provisions in the old code, to reorganize them into articles that made more sense and were more user-friendly. So we are actually rewriting a new code, but trying to bring some of the provisions that are still relevant into the new code but we're not starting with the old code and deleting and inserting, because the old code was too fragmented and really didn't make a lot of sense to people that were trying to use it. So that's the dilemma that we had.
Okay, may I? I completely understand that there's a lot of organizational issues with the current zoning ordinance, but that can be dealt with through a red line. And I very much take issue, John, with what you just said, that, oh, well, we're starting as if there is no existing law. That is just wrong. There is existing law. There has been no resolution passed by City Council directing the Planning Commission treat the existing ordinance as if it doesn't exist and start from zero. No one said that. There is an existing law. And if you're going to go forward on this basis, I'm just warning you, you are going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble. First of all, you're going to have trouble with the people. And we've seen that in Harbor Springs. And you're going to have trouble legally because you are not following an appropriate legal process. And I would urge you, now that we have new legal counsel on board, we have the Foster Swift firm, they are very experienced in municipal law. I would urge you to consult with them about this, because you want to go forward and you want to have Planning Commission vote on something, you want to have City Council vote on something, and they're going to be voting on documents where existing language is omitted, but you can't say whether or not the people who voted intended to omit that language. Did they or didn't they? And I noticed too, John, that you did, when you're getting to the Planning Commission level, that you've got this summary page that says existing code and proposed code. But even that is like the one that came with Article 5, the existing code sections that you list, those aren't even from the existing code. The existing code only has 5.1. The existing, there's no 5.2 through 5.36. That's all coming from your draft. I think you're on a very slippery slope here, not recognizing that we have a law in place right now. And yes, you are proposing to revise an existing law. It's not appropriate to say, oh, let's just throw all that out. Whoever voted on that, just throwing out everything and starting from scratch. I'm not aware of that.
All right, well, thank you for your comments.
We'll take it under advisement.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll take it under advisement. Thank you very much.
All right. I appreciate the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Albert.
I know I did try to do that with the very first article. I went line by line from the old code to the new code. And was told that was going to be a very bulky process, which I understand. But I do know how to do a search and find inside a PDF. I just want to make sure we do it right. And
Right.
I do think asking the city attorney where we are with this, because I would hate to go down a whole path and then find out that No, we have to go back and redline everything. We had to redline before. I
Right,
just think that's something for the zoning committee to talk about and go from there. And I understand this, we also have some deadlines we want to get to and those things, so.
mhm,
But I would rather take the time and do it right. Than have, you know, people concerned with not being.
Well, I think we're doing it right, but I will confer with the new attorney, because, you know, every law firm has their own way of doing their own reviews. But, you know, I think when we started the process, that if we started with the old code, the idea was that we were gonna reorganize and try to really update.
I understand 100%.
Yeah.
I like the idea of go one page
Yeah.
and find out how to put up my storage for the 17th. You know, that I understand.
Yeah. But we'll get with Foster Swift on it. It's not a,
right,
we'll
and
do that before the next meeting.
right, and we do have redlined documents that we've worked.
Oh, yeah, we've redlined internally, yeah.
Yeah.
Before you get them in draft form, we've gone through a series of red lines, because that's how we track all of our edits.
But is it red line of the old code?
It's
It's red line of what we're working at.
what we're working on.
I see notes, that's it.
Yeah.
Redundant.
Yeah.
We get it.
Right,
Yeah, they're all on that.
and they're all online? Okay, so that's part of that webpage. It shows
Yeah,
all
everything,
working document.
everything that the zoning committee works on, and everything that the planning commission sees is all
Okay.
on the project web. So the zoning committee packets are there, the planning commission packets are there. You can go through and see the evolution of how this thing is working through.
Well, I think Allison's point was, there's no red line going on right now
No,
of the old code. And, you know, I think that's something that at least ask the lawyer about, because I think she does have a valid point. What if there is something in the law that we intend, that everybody in this commission, if they understood it, would want there, but we accidentally leaving out? And that is, you know, something I think we should, the zoning committee should do.
Okay. So, let's see, any other public comments about something that's not related to the, go ahead. State your name and address.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Martinez. I live at 1105 Preview Avenue. I'm not an attorney, former teacher, former harpist, so I just came to say thank you. I appreciate the hard work that the subcommittee is doing. I've attended a few of the meetings, and it was pretty tedious work that you were doing, but try to hang on and figure out where your direction was. I came tonight because I am concerned about the duplexes, the triplexes, the quadplexes that were on the agenda. So I'll come back and visit you again. But I wanted to thank you as a committee for all the work you're doing. And I particularly appreciate all the nitpicking things that are going on, that defining so that we can best understand, and so there's no loopholes or gray areas. I also appreciate Mr. Moss's comments about the view, because Petoskey, the view, like Bo Schembechler said about the team, that view is so special to all of us who are attracted here because of the view. It's a spiritual home for us because of that view. And yes, the equipment added to the top take from our view. And overall, when we think about it, the view is wonderful and spiritually warming, but it's also our money maker. So we need to protect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. All right. So I adjourn this meeting at 8:08 PM.